So, hey guys, for those who don't know me, my name is Jamie Adams, and I am one of the, founding directors of our little company called the Old Creamery. We're a 3 acre hobby farm which got out of control and has now become a business. This is the first time I am doing anything like this. Um, but as much as I've been sharing on social media, and a lot of people have been following recently and coming on this journey with us, um, I really wanted to be authentic in how I present my social media but it's not all roses and sunflowers and dahlias, but obviously there's lots of dahlias. But behind all of that, there's a whole framework of a business which has to come along on the journey. And as a small business owner, you're going to have to learn this. And there is help and support out there, but it can be really overwhelming. And you're learning because you're wearing all these hats. You're the coffee maker, you're the seed planner, you're the weeder, the accountant, the social media manager, all this is just going on and on and on. And when I put this idea together a few weeks ago on social media, the response was overwhelming that this is what he wanted to see and hear from us. So this is kind of the first foray into that space, if you will. So please bear with me. It might be a complete roller coaster ride, but this is what we were asked to present on in a way recently at the National Dahlia Society of Australia's annual conference. That was last week in Coffs Harbour. I think my mouth is still recovering from all the wonderful connections and talking. But we did a presentation with two other people around websites, marketing, being a DIY business. And I wanted to do what I guess my own strengths are, and that's working with bookkeeping, systems. I have a very strong admin background. I worked in corrections for 16 years. That really gave me a foundation of, admin, lots of admin in that space. You wouldn't think it as much as actually working with the clients, but behind the scenes, there's so much admin involved. And that's kind of set myself up for success in this kind of space. So I'm here because somewhere between growing pretty flowers and starting to answer text messages and emails at 11 o'clock at night, many of us accidentally built a business around our hobby. For us, the Old Creamery started about 8 years ago. And business soon forces you to wear all of those hats I just spoke about. From social media manager, the cleaner, the one they all bitch about, the coffee machine, me bitching to myself, business meetings, which do involve gin occasionally, and somewhere in there I have to make an income. And we also hold down regular jobs. So my day-to-day job is I'm an accounts clerk or an admin clerk. I do a lot with accounts and bookkeeping at data entry kind of level. And when I then I report to an accountant above. But then in my business, I'm across everything and doing my monthly and quarterly BASes and reconciliations. And then I get my accountant at the end of the year to tell me if I'm on track or not. So there's a bit of there. But basically, every creative aspect of what we're doing on a farm is open to public critique. In many rural areas, we don't have the instant success you may see on Instagram. For us, flowers are not always an everyday occurrence. Funerals, weddings, those big key events. Not many people I guess, dairy farmers and rural communities buy flowers every day. They're not an everyday item they have in their home. If they do, they may go down the garden and pick their own roses. So wherever your customer base is and your geographic location is really going to tailor how you run a business. But the important thing is somewhere within all that busy work and self-doubt, that somewhere in there is you'll find what's true to you. It's completely magic. It gets you out of bed every morning and never take it for granted. It's very easy to. You look outside the window and you see a load of work and doom and gloom. And then I go on Instagram and I share a picture to someone and you're connecting with an entire audience who may be living in a high-rise flat in Melbourne and have no concept of what you're seeing on 3 acres. So I always try and keep that in mind, that sometimes what we're creating is more than just a product to sell. I guess it's a dream, it's a vision, it's escapism for someone as well at that time of need. And we all do that. We're all guilty of sitting on the phone scrolling and thinking, oh wow, that looks amazing. But anyway, let's get into it. So I want to talk about worth because many of us are excellent growers, but we're terrible at valuing ourselves, me included, or understanding the time things really cost. This has still been one of my biggest learning areas. And I know there's a lot of work with the Flower Summit, I want to say, in Australia at the moment about trying to have some kind of uniformity of flower pricing. States things will vary. For example, New South Wales flowers are more expensive than what you would get wholesale in Victoria. So there will be those geographical differences, but it's about getting people thinking and really starting to price out what things cost them to produce. So that A, you're not undercutting yourself, you're not undercutting the industry, we're not completely undercutting the floristry industry, because we all have to come together and work as a partnership. We have import flowers. Obviously, they're going to drive that price really down. And there's some education around how people support local growers and the benefits of doing so. The reality is, imports aren't going anywhere. We're not going to be able to get rid of them. We probably shouldn't get rid of them in some way because they bring a lot of money in and a lot of you know, um, trade routes and agreements and all that kind of high level government stuff. So there's a purpose for everything. We all need to find our little niche and work together in a bigger industry. Um, So we just spoke briefly about who we are. So we, over the last 8 years, we've grown ourselves up to be an award-winning micro flower farm in Numurkah. It was never on my agenda to be a flower farm. It's never been on my agenda to even do anything floristry. I always liked the creative aspect, but I always was of the mindset: you go to work, you get paid, you come home, you make sure you've got a living, you can pay your bills. One day you'll have a house, you'll have a mortgage. Like it was always very structured and routine. Yes, I was in corrections, remember, but that was my upbringing. COVID came along, changed our whole vision, um, and we're here where we are today. But a little bit about our journey. So initially, we started, like many people, as a home sideline business. I call it my gin money. We bought our house, we renovated, we decided that, let's put an Airbnb. It was a bit of a joke. We're in the middle of nowhere, and I was like, who the hell is going to come and stay with two gay boys in the middle of the country? Anyway, people did. And for a while, it was quite a good little income. We're talking like 15, 16 grand a year, extra money in the back pocket. Probably wasn't declared back then, but that's how most little businesses start. But things start taking traction. You have to start thinking about, this isn't my little side hobby anymore. There's a bit of an income, there's an interest. Let's start putting some frameworks around it. COVID came along. Like for many people, we were sat at home, unable to do much. Airbnbs certainly went out the window. And my husband, Gareth, being a chef, um, I went through his cupboards of all these little condiments and he kept giving to people. And I was like, well, why do you keep giving stuff away? Because, being the partner on the other side, I see the 6, 7, 8 hours it took to make the product for him to give it away. And I think, well, you could at least recover your costs or do something. So in that time, our local town did a taste of Numurkah, which is kind of like they just try and get a bit of interest, some tourism build up. Great opportunity for local suppliers and producers to showcase their products. We got a jar out. Big thank you to local IGA because they loved it and they put their first order in and suddenly we were in business. And the rest is history in that kind of space. So we now have about 12 providors, bakeries, little things like that. Just ticking along. At the end of the day, the condiments certainly go through a bit of a roller coaster. So Christmas is, Easter, certain times of the year they kind of have a spike and then they settle back down. But overall, they're not enough to bring in a full income on their own. And I think this is what we'll keep going back to, is that you need to have lots of diversity in a small business so that together you make something which is actually worthwhile keeping doing. And for me, who's a Gemini, and I can stops me getting bored. So we call it experience-based agro-tourism, which is a very big word. But that has kind of come together from doing work with a few mentors, looking at grant options for things we want to run on the property. And agro-tourism, or agri-hort tourism is the new one, is really, really in. Since COVID, people are wanting experience-based. They want to touch things, they want to feel things, rather than just pick up a product and buy it. And that's going to be a really good insight in terms of income for small businesses, particularly doing what we're kind of doing. Farmer, florist, and educator. I laugh at the last one, but it seems to be a space we're moving into. Dahlias, well, I bought one, I didn't kill it. I bought two, I didn't kill it. I bought 100, didn't kill it. The story's quite familiar. And then at some point along that journey, you think, well, how do I start turning this into funding my addiction, funding my hobby, and then it becomes a business. Obviously, the market has got a lot of little home growers now, lots of people selling dahlia tubers. The market is arguably still on the rise, but at some point it's going to peter out. And for us, we found out, I guess, our unique selling point in this space was selling live dahlia plants. So we've perfected this over the last 6, 7 years, how to take cuttings, grow good quality plants, and then how do we deliver them to the customer. Hopefully this year we're going to start talks about how we can bring that product to Tasmania and even Western Australia. But remember, we're growing on 1 acre, so we're not going to change the industry. We're just doing our little part in our little world, but we've created I guess, sustainable business. Mifkas came along. Mifkas was this complete left field phone call one day from a lovely lady called Mia. She was running a 3 by 3 meter garden based on Mexican themes. Hi, found you on Google. I want some dahlia plants if you can around March. And we were like, sure. Found out what the concept was. I said, this is amazing. We'd like to donate them to you. A few weeks later, I had a phone call from the organizer of Mifkas who'd just come back from England and had seen a dahlia display and said, it's 3 weeks' notice, guys, but can you pull something together? I'd love to do something on dahlias. So we did a very basic information stand with lots of dahlias just from the garden in little vases and etc. etc. And I'm going to have to pause because I've just had the neighbours turn up as we're recording live because this is what it's like in the country. So give me 1 second. Right, guys, we're back on again. Just give me 1 second. I'm going to bring this presentation back up for you, and we're going to finish talking about Mifkas. And I am going to just own up to the fact that I've just finished this whole presentation, realized that I didn't actually hit the record button. So we're back, and you're going to get take two, which hopefully is actually better than what take one was. Oh, dearie me. So, we're talking about Mifkas. We did this wonderful display in the first year. Then what happened was we got asked back. Amazing. These sites are like 3 by 3. They start at about $7,000. We are so fortunate and lucky that and honoured that we've been asked to do this, and we never even get charged. So we're very mindful that when we go into this space, this is not the old creamery. We're there to promote and educate the dahlia. And yes, there's some there's some subside of that comes back to us through business, but that is our first and foremost approach. And we wanted to create this really big activation this year. So from all the stories and memories of the dahlia people were talking about, how do we bring that into this space this year? So we created an immersive garden almost where you could actually walk in. The archway was based on Stonehenge. In the 1800s, they had dahlia festivals. It's crazy. There was like 40,000 people went to look at dahlias in the 1800s. Just think about that. In Stonehenge, in England. So we created our own version of a Stonehenge. We have this little garden in front which had podded dahlias so the flowers would last over the whole week. And people came in, they were invited to share their stories. They wrote their stories on the cards. Over the week, we had about 600 people contribute. Children were drawing and colouring them in. And it was just this wonderful activation of community about the dahlia and what it meant to them. Sue is a shout out. She's our volunteer. Hello, Sue, if you're probably going to watch this. She comes up and helps us on the farm a couple of times, probably more than a couple of times throughout the year. And, this farm has really become a community in its own little way, and it's amazing. Sometimes I feel as the owner, I just turn up. Everyone else is doing their own little bit around it, and that's just great. I mean, even the neighbour who just interrupted this wonderful live stream, hello, Judy, again. Every time we go away, every time we have an open day, she's the first one to put her hand up and come and help. And that's really just about this wonderful community we're building here. That it's not just about me selling flowers. So Mifkas happened. Mifkas was amazing. Our little concept was so well received that I now have all these cards and I'm not sure what to do with them. Maybe a coffee book, something to raise some money for charity. I just need to have that time and space to think about it. And again, 2027, we will be back at Mifkas with an even better and bigger and bolder design. So in my sleeping hours, I'll start working on that. But back to the content of what we're talking about today. So your dahlia farm is not a hobby, because at the end of the day, your passion does not pay your wage. It doesn't pay your GST. It doesn't pay your tax. As soon as we start bringing in any kind of regular income from what we do as a hobby, then we're not a hobby. We're a business. And just as much as you might not like the idea, that's the reality legally, financially, and the ATO is looking at hobby farms and especially microflower farms this year. because there's been such a big increase in sideline businesses, particularly with the cost of living crisis, increased mortgage rates. People look at how to bring income in, and obviously the ATO are not idiots and can start looking. And from speaking with my accountant over the years, they do look at your social media. So just keep that in mind. I don't want to scare anybody, but if you're pocketing money and doing whatever you want to do with it, that's great. You make your money, but B, I think there's also you have legalities and obligations too. Um, if you don't want to work for your boss in your normal everyday job without getting paid, why would you want to do that in your own business? And that's what it comes back to. Sustainability for the environment is something I'm really big on, but I also need to make sure my business is sustainable. If it's not going to be here next year, why am I putting a 100-hour week in this week and next week and the week after to have nothing at the end of it? So start thinking about how this business is going to reward you, not just internally, financially, and how it enriches the rest of your life too. So, but I'm not going to say it's not easy. I struggle with pricing, and I'm sure I'm not the only one who makes up a bunch. I've costed it out, and I've come back at the end of the day and I go, I'll just put one more in. I'm just going to put one more in. Just going to put one more in. Oh, I don't think there's much for $25. And before you know it, I've created a $50 bunch, and I'm handing it to the customer, and they're like, amazed. But all of my frameworks and systems I've put into place in my head and told myself off, I've just gone out the window, and ultimately that's doing not only myself but the wider industry a disservice as well. So it's not easy. I get that. Farming is certainly not easy. Lots of farms come and go. So if you're in this for the long haul, think about making yourself and your business as sustainable as it can be, financially and otherwise. But I want to start thinking about the true cost of a bloom. And this is not, these numbers are not made up, but they're numbers which I can equate to for my business at the current time. They will change depending on where you are in Australia, your incomes, and so your inputs and your outputs will all change. But it's the things I want to start thinking about when you're looking at that pretty flower in the paddock and you think, oh, well, it's worth X amount. I want you to think, yes, it might be worth that, but I have to pay for all this other stuff from that one single price point I've come up with. So it's just to get you thinking. There's no right and wrong answer in here. So if I start with a flower at Victoria this year from a wholesaler in Melbourne was $2.40. Arguably, when I sell that to a florist, they're actually getting a better product. They're not getting something that's been bashed around in a van and shipped halfway across the country or wherever to get to you as the florist or florist maker or, at that point. So when I deliver my blooms, which are straight from the paddock in a bucket, there's no plastic, there's no touching of each other, they're separated out nicely and fresh picked that morning, you could argue that your wholesale price could be even higher. But that's the discussion between you and your supplier and what they're willing to pay and how you sell and present your product. So retail, anywhere from above that. Average price I hear is $3 to $7 a stem. That is what you sell to your customer at. So if I buy a tuber and it's cost me $18 and I get 20 flowers out of that tuber, it's about 90 cents a flower I've made from that one tuber coming in. Not bad, really. You probably get more flowers than that, but that's a good average, just a place to start. Then I have to buy my compost to really grow good healthy flowers. I have to feed them. I have to put water into them. Depending on where you live and on town water versus on stock and domestic, that water price can be quite substantial. We're now using drip lines, so we obviously reduce the amount of water we need, and it also reduces the amount of pressure we need to supply that water, which means our electricity costs come slightly down too, because we're not pumping big pumps. Wages if I want to take home about $30 an hour, which is what I get paid in my normal job, which is not much in the big scheme of things if you look at what some people may charge for what they're doing and the hours they put in. And if you even get to the point you're taking a wage, but you still need to think about it as a wage. Wages in Australia, if I was going to take home that $30 an hour rate, I need to be turning over $1,394 a week to get a full-time 38-hour a week wage. Because I have to pay tax, I have to pay my super. No one else is paying that, so I have to generate that myself if I'm going to be self-employed. The cost of selling the goods, so these are the costs directly associated to that product. So they're not my overheads and day-to-day costs. These are just if I'm going to sell this bouquet to you at $25, what does that cost? Well, I can tell you straight away from $25, I lose $2.73 in something called GST. which as a small business, you'll have to start paying. I think if you earn more than $65,000 a year income, that's not what you take home as profit, that is your turnover. It kicks in. It might be 70,000, but that's something between and you and an accountant. I'm not giving financial advice. I'm more just getting you to think about some of these costs and where they come from. Anyway, fuel delivery. We're paying we're paying nearly $2.20 a litre recently. So for me to get those flowers to my cafe or to my customer, there's a cost there nowadays. It's not just I can just pop down the road. You only a couple of minutes. My wrapping costs, my promotion care. So if they have to go in a fridge, if I have to take photographs, I have to put them online. I need a good phone to do that with. All these little things will add up over time. My website costs, I need to have a good site which works, looks appealing. People are going to come and buy off me. Websites can be free. There's pros and cons to that. We're at this point now, we pay. We pay a yearly fee. It's about $500, I think, from memory. So broken up over the year, it was about $50 a month, but we get a discount by paying yearly. We've got our overheads, which I'll talk about more in a moment. So repairs and maintenance, day-to-day expenses. I buy things, they're going to need replacement, they're going to need repairing, sprayers are going to block, pumps are going to break, forks are going to break when I'm lifting my tubers up, and it's all these things will happen at the worst possible time too. So I need to think about what those costs are going to be over a year. Machinery in my car, obviously I need a tractor maybe, or some forks, tools, secateurs, all that kind of fun stuff goes into there. Obviously I've got a car now which takes me from A to B, lets me deliver my flowers to a customer. Pardon me. My utility bills, gas, electric, power, water, insurance. So I've got obviously house and contents insurance. I run a business from home, so it costs me more. I've got a shed we use for our propagation. We don't insure our product because it would be too expensive to even think about it. But potentially, loss of income, things like that. That's all the insurances you may want to do. If you open your farm to the public, you're going to need public and liability insurance, minimum $50 a month, just to have a workshop on the farm or something, so that if someone comes in, trips over and hurts themselves, well, you're not liable. We've only got our wages, the super, our stuff, like I just said. So social media, subscribers, potentially GST. So our social media is at the point now, it costs me $37 a month to have a little blue tick. We got that because we got hacked and we're still having some issues in that space, but it got me access to support through Meta when we needed it. I think it's, should I have to pay $37 a month just to get support from something? But anyway, we did. So that's now an ongoing overhead I need to consider. Subscribers, when we want to have a sale, we're going to email them. How are we going to do that? We have things called customer management systems. The biggest one you've probably heard about is MailChimp. Fantastic. We used it for the first 2 years. It's really, really easy to use until I realized I was spending $80 a month to have 1,500 contacts. I don't want to work that into how much per person. And then you've got to think about, well, how of those 1,500 people, who's actually buying off me every single day of the week? Is it worthwhile? Am I even using that software to its advantage? And I wasn't. We send out an email probably once, 2, 3 times a year saying we've got a sale on for this, that, It's not really giving me a generation of income to warrant $80 a month. So we've actually got rid of it. MailChimp completely we got rid of. We've now integrated, because we use Shopify, their own internal messaging system. And we've had to create our own templates for like email heads. What can we even call them? Like newsletters, email outs. So they're all staying true to our brand. But there was a cost involved and a bit of time, but we're saving $80 a month turnover. Fantastic. So when we start putting all this together, it gets a bit messy, as you can imagine. And we go back to that price again. We're asking a lot from that $2.40 or that $3 a stem we're selling to a customer. So understanding what our outputs are is just as important to help us establish what our income price is going to be. Instagram versus reality. So Instagram and social media can be a friend, but also remember that every business shows its best self to its customer all the time. Instagram is very inspiring. It's a great place to scroll. It's escapism. But it's important not to try and hold yourself to the same the same perfection of what you see on Instagram. I like to call it the 45-degree turn. If you picked up your phone and turned it 45 degrees, would you still see the same image you've just been shown on Instagram? I think in the case of many people, probably not. If I turn my camera or the screen right now, I could tell you there's dishes that haven't been done. There's a parrot stand I need to go and clean out shortly. There's a vacuum cleaner what's chewed up my cord for the fourth time this week. There's receipts from my invoice that I need to get done. And there's a trail of dirty shoes to the door. I need to go and start doing tubers too, but I wanted to get this recorded because I've been talking about doing it for quite some time. Um, so it's completely fine to be inspired, but don't hold yourself to this is what my life has to look like every single time of day because you'll go crazy. So my other tip is that when it starts to impact you negatively in any way, it's okay to unfollow businesses. Particularly last year, it really got to me how many pre-sales there were. And we were still in the paddock picking flowers in May, June, because we get quite a late season here. And there's dahlias being sold left, right, and centre. And I'm like, how, when I still have tubers which are nice and healthy and green? Is this happening? And anyway, we don't do pre-sales. I don't agree with them. I'd rather make sure I squirrel some money away during the season to make sure I can survive sustainably through winter, versus having to rely on a pre-sale to bring money in. That's fine. Everyone has their own business way of doing things. This is just how we do it. And I am a stress head and I wouldn't sleep at night knowing I had money and then I may have to refund it if I couldn't provide that product for whatever reason. So that's just something to think about too. Finding your brand, because you always have to be yourself. You can't be anyone else. And if you try and be somebody else or you're not, well, you're not really going to be authentic. And people will see through that. And especially in this world, we're all quite vain these days and we don't connect with something. We move, we unlike, we unfollow, we're on to the next thing. Like, it's probably not a good thing in the big scheme of things, but that's the world we live in. So really spend some time on your brand because your brand is what you want people to say when they think about you. Spend time on it. It took us 3 months to come up with this kind of logo idea. The first jar of relish we made typically had about 30 designs. And we scrolled it around and we played with different ideas until we found this country kind of vibe what we liked. Every jar which leaves here has a little Yorkshire phrase, which is where I'm from. And we do talk a bit funny in Yorkshire. It's a bit like up that to town, that love you love. All right, love. And it actually hurts to talk like that these days. But those kind of phrases and a bit of fun were not comical, but you gave us a little bit of interest when people are reading a jar. You'll say something like, it's a proper cordial for a proper drink, love. And people giggle, but they've got a connection to that thing. It's more than just buying a product. So every single jar now includes a little tagline somewhere. We always have our cow because our cow we're a dairy farm. We purchased an old dairy farm. We're trying to keep the heritage of what this farm was, but also bring it into the modern day world of this is what a micro flower farm looks like, or a micro horticultural business, agro business, whatever that big wonderful word I said at the start. And then we need to find out what the USP is, so our unique selling point. So before I just go on to that, the other point I'd like to make is that we spent all this time on branding, and we use these big words, and they help us get some grant money every now and again. But ultimately, whatever your customers associate you as is your brand. And I can tell you around here, we're simply the boys. Two gay boys, the boys. It's just have you been and bought from the boys? Have you been and seen the boys? Oh, the boys might be able to do that for you. And that's fantastic because, it's quick, simple. So we're almost hashtagging the boys. If I could copyright it, the boys, would be great. But it flows on to simply as being, you're the boy who does the jars. You're the boy who does the flowers. I'm nearly 42 and I'm probably not a boy, but I'll own it for as long as I can. But that's my brand. My brand is you're just the boy who does something. And they associate that. So there's nothing wrong with having something really, really grassroots as your branding if that's what your customer connects to you on a local level, because that might differ to what my wider audience connect to me as well. But own it, because that's basically what they've made your business brand be. So unique selling point is what is unique in this whole world about what you're doing. And some of it will be similar. We're all trying to do chemical-free flowers. We're all doing locally grown. We don't want to rely on imports. These are all our unique selling point when we're looking at the bigger picture. But we're also two gay boys running a flower farm, which is quite stereotypical in a way. I know. But, we're two gay boys in the country, which we've, traditionally hasn't always been well received. Um, so there's certainly a portion of the community, they call it the pink dollar, wants to see visibility in what we're doing. And that's why we're visible as well, because, somewhere in some country, being who you are is not accepted. And I certainly grew up in a world where that wasn't the case, in England back in the 80s and the 90s. So, without digressing too much, but what we're doing and achieving, if somebody else sees that and thinks, if they can do it, so can I, that gives that person hope. But, there is someone like them in the world. So that's why we keep showing up. That's why I keep doing things like this. It pushes me out of my comfort zone because I certainly would rather be on the other side of the camera than sitting here talking to you like this. Not that many people believe that these days, but it's the truth. Um, and then your avatar. So we're all using about avatars. Um, it's basically the cartoon version of a customer. I want you to think about it like that. So when you're coming up with ideas on how to market yourself or market a product, think about, well, who's going to buy it? Because that's how I'm going to market it. If I'm going to market a bunch of flowers to sell to my customer Gail down the road who loves flowers, doesn't want chemicals, wants sustainability, my whole marketing is going to be talking about that. If I'm trying to sell my flowers around Valentine's Day, I'm trying to get every single husband in this area, A, to remember it's Valentine's Day, B, to think that their wives are actually worth spending some money on because traditionally in a lot of rural areas, it's not. It's not. Some flowers are not everyday expenses. They maybe birthdays, funerals, weddings. There's a lot of commercialization around Valentine's Day they don't buy in. But we all know there's not a single person in the world who doesn't like receiving a bunch of flowers. So how do we get the Bob, who's a farmer, to buy into that? And also, how do we make it easy for Bob? Because Bob's milking 7 days a week, twice a day, and doesn't have time to walk into a shop or a florist and think about flowers and making decisions and what his wife will like. So simple as putting some flowers in your car, making them affordable, and turning up on his driveway and going, "Hey Bob, it's Valentine's Day today. Did you know? Do you want some flowers for the missus?" And that's proven quite well for us. So it's thinking about your target audience and what you're going to connect with. If you're unsure about where to start, and I'm not really going to push AI because it's taking over the world. But from a strategic point of view, it can help a business. So, for example, ChatGPT, you can input some information about that person we just talked about and ask it for a couple of hours suggestions on how to promote your idea to that person, how they will understand it. And I think that's where ChatGPT and AI are some really good, valuable assistance for us in running businesses. But for a wider community, because obviously our social media is now just as much of an extension of our business and community as the local everyday business is, you can go into Facebook. So I'm just going to jump across here. I'm going to go back to where you can see where it was because as I said, I did record half of this and realized it wasn't recording. So from our homepage, I can go into my professional dashboard. I have insights. I'm just going to put this on so we can look at the last 30 days, for example. And I can tell you straight away, I'm looking at this, interest for my demographic of audiences, reels don't really do me that. Reels are popular. There's 25% of everything I put up has been viewed is a reel, but there's still 50% of people who prefer a photograph. So that's probably showing that my demographic of followers, which I know is an older generation, really, older than me, still like to look at something, they like to read about it, they don't particularly want to watch it as much. Whereas a younger generation, and younger flower farms especially, the whole world is TikTok and Instagram. And that's really not a world I connect with authentically. It's important too because there's a business and a customer base coming in from that. But I have to really, really push myself to understand that demographic and how I communicate to them, which is fine. There's nothing wrong with that. If we put our industry as a whole, it's all these different businesses all filling different needs and gaps. What's really interesting at the moment is this 60% of our content has been seen by people who don't follow my business. So that means we're actually reaching outside our community to all these new people at the moment. I have no idea why. Nothing's really changed. I keep posting the same amount of content as I've always have done, but people are watching it from a different aspect now. So the interesting thing is how do you then you're putting the right amount of content out that those people then become your followers which means they then see when you're having sales, you've got products for sale more often than just at random stab in the dark that they saw it and buy it. Interesting. Let's look at our audience. So if we look at the same amount of time, 528 people have followed us. We're on a bit of a climb at the moment. We've probably doubled our engagement, as you can see, like it's going up really, really quickly. And I think if you look at the last, we're just done. I'm not going to do the last year because I had to play around with it too much because I thought it would have just come up as an option. But I would say our followers have nearly doubled in the last year, which is just amazing. Over that same period, I lost 76 people. The anxiety version of me would freak out and want to know who they are and why they've left and what have I done wrong. 8 years in business is starting to tell me, you're not going to please everyone. You can't please everyone, and that's fine. And we're all putting our own different personalities out in the world, and that's not going to connect to everyone, and that is fine. If we all loved each other, the world would be a boring place. And I can be a bit outspoken. It's my northern English bluntness. It comes out. My friends will tell you that. So I probably have annoyed some people over the years too, but but that's fine because those 76 people are not part of my community or my vision, and they'll go to where they feel comfortable. So same in any kind of life. So don't dwell on people if they're leaving. If you've had a massive drove of people leaving you and your net followers was going completely the opposite way, then you might need to look at what's happening within your business and what you're putting out there. But this is where it's more interesting as well. We talk about our unique selling point. We can see a huge amount of our followers are females versus males. So when I'm designing and creating content and trying to sell a product, well, I'm not going to focus it all around, how I'd market to a guy when I know that 80% of the people who are realistically going to buy it are women. And in my case, they're in the older bracket of 45 to 54, which is the next level up from where I am as being a 42-year-old kind of thing. So the same time, like we said, that younger generation, which, as I said before, I can struggle in a way to how I authentically connect to them. Well, they're not really. They're only 10% of my following us at the moment anyway. So to get their need out of what they want from Instagram, well, they're finding for farms to go and do that from anyway. So work on what works for you. And this is the kind of information I would go to ChatGPT with and go, okay, well, my audience base is at the moment 60% non-followers, with 40% who follow my business. They're predominantly women. They live in Melbourne and Numurkah, which is our hometown. I've got some in Shepparton, which is our next major town. So really, there's quite a good local connection of what we're going and what we're doing, which I found really interesting because when I do my actual sales, I would say this is quite minimal compared to what's going interstate, Queensland, Melbourne, South Australia, for example. So it'd be interesting to compare this data with what's actually happening on my email out, which I probably could do through Shopify. Haven't done that. That's just giving me an idea to look at. But it's all data, and data doesn't lie. So data gives us a truth point, which I think is really important when you're looking at your business and your books and your accounts, is the truth of where you're coming from. Country really doesn't impact too much, but interestingly, 94% is Australian. That's good. There's probably a couple of people in America now following us. That's probably quite normal with this weird dahlia craze, but there's a lot of demand now for Australian cultivars, which we don't ship internationally, sorry, but there's interest. And England, being from England, that's probably my family. Hi, Mum, that 1.3%, and Grandma. Anyway, so it gives you something to come back to when we're looking at finding that brand and what it actually looks like for you as a company and how you then market that. So let's go back to the $1 million business. So no matter your size or your starting point, I want you to think and run that business as if it was $1 million business. You want to make sure you've got good advice. There's so many funded mentors out there which are available, and you can go book some sessions. Jump on any Google or search engine and go free business mentoring, and you'll be amazed at how much is out there. There are short courses on how to do accounts. There's short courses how to do social media. It's all there available if you want to invest in yourself. We've done a couple of mentors over the year. The best advice for them is if you have lots of them give you free hours, and you can choose different mentors. So go into it and pick 3 different ones. You'll get 3 different concepts of ideas. I can tell you one at the moment. I am brainstorming with. I spent a whole hour working just on how we turn our farm into a on-farm experience. And it was really high level. It probably wasn't really tangible, um, which was a bit of a downside. But it got me thinking about how our farm plays into a wider Australian industry in terms of agricultural, horticultural experiences and tourism. Because we said before, customers are really wanting not just the item, they want that connection to the item and the experience that goes with it. And that's why our pedals and paws workshops on farm have just been so, I think, so well received. Um, so that was really interesting to get your head into that space, and that will help you if you go down the pathway of ever applying for grants for stuff you want to do, because there's grants out there. They won't cover wages and stuff, but we delivered 36 ladies in our Pedals and Paws workshop covered by a grant which was aimed at reducing mental health fatigue on farmers and rural communities in drought. So, perfect. Completely left field of what you would think those grants are about, but it got farmers off their farms into a happy little safe space to do so, connect to nature and just have some quiet time. And that's where the Pedals and the Paws comes in. The Paws is just, quiet time from life. So we were honoured that we got that money and could deliver that service. So that's something for you to think about. Anyway, I digressed. Account software, making sure you understand where your money comes in and goes out. There's lots of different systems out there. Basic plans are fine. Even if you just have income outcoming, you don't break it into where all these streams are coming from. It's a good place to start. But being in the business, you need to understand your figures and what's making you money and what's costing you money, just as importantly. So at the end of the day, you can make informed decisions. It doesn't take away from having an accountant or a bookkeeper or whatever you want to do, but this is your business, it's your baby, it's your investment. So be inside it, understand it the best of your ability. It's also important, and I think I might have said before, but there's a whole world of flower farm movements, micro farms, cottage industry resurgence, and it usually happens from people trying to make sideline incomes when the world's pretty shit, as we know at the moment. So, what I would say to you on that basis is that as much as your fans and your followers are following you, there's a chance that the ATO may be looking too. And they do look at socials, they look at Instagram. So if you're making money and you're operating which appears to be a business, don't be surprised that they then see you as a business too and come and ask you some questions at tax time. So that $1 million business. So we talk about the basics that you must have. We have 9 bank accounts. Crazy, I know. And this is something I set up at the start of last financial year, and it's really been a huge help for us. And what that effectively does is lets us have visibility over our income, our expenditure, especially where it's coming from. So I can make this day-to-day decisions. I can go, can I afford to buy this? Because my account, or my buckets, we're going to call them, doesn't have the money available in it to do so. So you can see here, quite simple. Some of these we've got the old creamery top everyday account. We have our profit account, which is about 15%. I put money away for Pedals and Paws, which is our on-farm workshops, only because people may book them 3, 4, 5 months in advance. And if I'm thinking about it from a wage point of view, there's really not much outputs for the workshops because they're on farm and we're picking flowers. So that work's already been done as such in putting the tubers in the ground. But for the workshop, when it comes round to that week, well, that's my income for the week. So I know there's money there. In that week, I can pull that money out and put it into where I need it to be. My royalty donation program, so we donate $1 to every single flower farmer or breeder of an Australian dahlia or a club. So when I receive my income, those donations, when I run my report, go into this account until I make my dividends and I make payments to those breeders or clubs. Cost of goods sold. So that is basically, as I said before, if I sell a plant to you, within that plant, I have to cover for the propagation costs of that plant, the pot, the little bit of cardboard that sits on top of it. And obviously when I'm buying these, I'm not buying one pot. I'm buying 2 or 3,000 at a time, potentially. Jars, I buy $1,000 of jars for my relish. So it lets me have money in there to cover that big expenditure when it comes up. GST, if you get to that point in your business and you have to pay GST, it's very important to have that money set aside, because nobody wants to be in debt to the government or the ATO because it could get messy for you. Profit. As a small business, you are allowed to make a profit. And it's probably a good thing because this is your rainy day fund. Think about it that way. So when it comes to winter, and we're trying to get through now, anything which is in our profit account is what we kind of live off day to day to get us through that period. And if we get through that and we still have money left, then that could potentially where we could take that money back out and pay ourselves as a wage, um, to go to Bali or something fun. Shipping and materials, it's 3%. It's very minimal, but that covers our Australia Post boxes. It covers things like the tape, the nice little card, the card we have printed. It's just having a little bit of income there. So when I need to go to Vistaprint and get them printed, I can go, oh, well, it's $75 for that. It's there. Or I want to invest in a new printer this year. Well, I go, can we afford it? Well, there's not much money in that account. Let's wait until we have a bit more income or the end of the year. Wages, ideally, that's where all your wages, 15% of all your income will be paid to you back as a wage. Now, these percentages are just what I use as an estimate. They may change in your business. The only things that won't change, obviously, is GST because that's set by the government. But if you know your costings day in, day out, at the end of 12 months, 24 months, you'd be able to sit down and go, okay, well, on average, you know what? Our shipping and materials, it costs us about 3-4%. I'll set that amount. Cost of goods sold, we're actually only 25%. I can bring that amount slightly down, and I might want to put that extra 5% into my profit instead. So you should always be looking at your costs. Basically, in any business, you're always evaluating what your cost of goods sold, because obviously things are going up all the time, and what you can absorb, or what you have to then put your prices up. For example, we know this year, 1st of July, shipping's going to have to go up because Australia Post is putting their shipping up. So that's the reality of our costs. We can't constantly absorb costs because that brings your profit margin right down. And again, sustainability in business. But you can make those decisions informed if you have good accounts. So I'm going to show you how I actually do this in reality. And we're at the end of the season, so I haven't done this for a while. But basically, I have a little spreadsheet, and it's all done on formulas. And if you really want the copy of this, just shoot us an email or something, and I will send it to you. But basically, we have our total income. So this is income from all of our streams. I just put QuickBooks and Shopify so I can add them together. It basically means whenever I do run this report, which I try and do every single time I get income coming in, but life gets busy. Sometimes I forget. I probably haven't done one this month because it's really just covering costs now. We're in winter. But when we're in the season and we've actually got some serious money coming in on a regular basis, this is so valuable. So QuickBooks is our accounting software. If I invoice a customer or a wholesaler, that's that income coming in. Shopify is our website, so that's when a customer buys direct. And together, that's the amount I've got coming in. I do minus off any shipping because ultimately that's not real income. It's coming in as the customer's paid for shipping, and then I'm going to ship that item, and that goes out as an expense. So I don't really count that as money I'm going to put into my buckets. It just kind of comes out of this transaction everyday account, which is basically where anything remaining from this money goes into. And it is set at a natural percent. I can't remember what percent it is. So it's the sum of all these, and then whatever was left from that. So if we go down, for example, I'm just going to put in this morning, I put in a invoice. I've just been paid for some workshops I did, $1,300. So when it's calculated, it means that in my everyday account, which is just, it's not non-discretionary spending because everything in the business is tracked, but that is just there for day to day. I go somewhere, I tap my card. I don't really worry about the smaller expenses day to day. But my cost of goods sold, so I know from that amount, I've just put $400 into my savings account for when I need to go and buy that for that plant pot, or I need to go and buy that plug, or I need to go and buy that jar. That's where that money will come from. I've just put $39 into our shipping account. Again, that's the box to post something. That's the tape if I need it. That's the stickers that go in the box and those little cards. We've just put $121 into, I believe that's our GST account. So that money just sits there all year round. It does its thing. Now I was saying about all those little accounts we have, like they don't cost me anything to set up. They're literally, because we're just two people, we're a partnership, where our business operates with personal bank accounts. They're separate bank accounts. We don't use them personally. They're linked for the business entirely. But because they're in our personal names, we can offset them against our mortgage. So every single balance you have is probably not doing a huge deal in the big scheme of things, but it's better than it costing me money by having business accounts. So you may not need a business account. Speak to an accountant or your financial advisor and find out, but this is what works for us. And I never spend this money. I only ever spend my GST money when I have to pay the ATO. When I get to the end of the financial year, so next week, and we do our final BAS and we work out what we have to pay, what's been refunded, and there's a balance in there, then that's the decision we can make about what we do with that because we're going to start fresh from next month. And that's the discussion we'll have with our accountant. But that money is basically off limits, storm, we don't spend it. Then we have a wage account. So we worked on this year that our wages should be about 15% of our income. So basically, if there's money in this account at the end of each week, woohoo, we can actually take a wage. We do have a worker 1 day a week. So ultimately, this is what her money comes out of when I pay her. So that's what my aim is, obviously, to make sure I can always maintain my stuff. And then ideally pay me something. And then we said we have this profit buffer savings, which is the rainy day fund and hopefully the barley fund one day when we can take it as a wage. So it's just there. It's the nicety to have after everything else. And I kind of think about if you looked at all of your accounts, this is business money. This is your everyday running costs. This is not your money. The profit at the end of the financial year is what you can pat yourself on the back and go, you know what, this is what we achieved. And it might not be much, but you know what? Go and do something with it. Even if you can take it out as a wage and go, I'm going to go out and pat myself back and have a meal or have a business dinner or something with it because that's paid for all of your hard work over the year. Well done. So hopefully that helped. Let me go back. This is the split incomes account. I don't think there's anything else I wanted to further add, but the whole concept of this was just to go away and think about what your business is and how it works for you, and to think past just those pretty flowers and what you're putting on the stand, because I want you as much as yourself probably does. You want to be here next year. You want to be here the year after and the year after that. And the only way you're going to do that is by having really good systems and thought processes in place, which gets you into the back end of your business and understanding how it all works and tweaks and comes together. I was going to show you my profit and loss pretty quickly because it's all very good talking about this income and outcome. How do I track it all? So at the moment, we're still within QuickBooks. We are changing. I'm going to take out some of this for the minute just so you can see. But for the last 3 years, we've turned over about 120k. And that's turnover. So we've got our expenses and everything else coming out of that. But this is what I can show you is tracked through our account. So everything that comes in or everything goes out, I can kind of tangibly see what's working, what's not, what am I spending too much money on, what am I not spending enough on, which products aren't making money. So why am I doing them if they're not going to make me any money? Because that's time. Everything comes back to time. And if you're not actually making big money, which we're certainly not, you think 123 grand a year is amazing, but if you think about it from a business point of view, I don't think any small scale business is a real true business until you're turning over about 200 grand a year, which is a lot of money. But at the same time, that's 2 wages at 50 grand. You're back to this around $100,000 of turnover. It means you've both been paid. You can both work in the business full time, but 50 grand a year each is not a lot of money in the big scheme of things either. Remember that. But your overheads and your turnover for us, is still about $91,000. So you need that $200,000 before you're actually really in the business and running it properly. That's based on what our income and our expenditure was over the last couple of years. And a lot of our expenditure is going about setting up the business. We're putting infrastructure in. We're doing this kind of stuff, which is normal when you're setting up a business. But let's break some of this down for you so you can see where our income comes from. So I'll pick out some of the bigger ones in here. At the end of the day, I work on the basis, you know what, $50 in my pocket is better than $50 in somebody else's. Sometimes that does me a disrespect to what I should be charging for some things because I'll still make bad decisions, but that's being human. But we can look there. So our farm, we'll look at the farm first. So I kind of break it into our condiments. They made $10,000 this year. It has been quite a dip in the condiment space, probably because rising costs. We're now around $12 a jar. In a local community, that's seen as quite an expensive premium product. On the wider homemade, sustainable, framework, I've seen things up to $15, $16 now. But people aren't buying them as an everyday item. They're now being seen as more of a, it's a birthday, it's a gift, it's more of a luxury item. But at the same time, $10,000 is not nothing to be, squirm about. It's a good little bit of income. And when we diversify those pockets and streams, I'm not going to say goodbye to them. We also don't publicise them that much. We're really heavily based on our flower farm at the moment, and there's a lot of work we're doing on that with our socials. We could be doing a lot more work with the condiments, and I probably should be doing that. So, that's also a reflection of where your income comes from and what people actually see and know about you. We can look at our Petals and Paws workshops. As I said, I started them in January this year for the first time, and they turned over $3,000. And whilst in the big scheme of the business, that isn't about making money for us. That is about paying me a wage Monday to Friday. So eventually I don't have to go to work and work the hours I do, which would be a shame because I actually really like my job. But ultimately, the goal for us is that we're now self-sufficient running this business itself, and cash flow is your biggest bugbear, I guess, for day-to-day life. So having a workshop which is sold out every single Saturday means you can make that decision to go, I don't need to work now because for the last, I've got money for the next X amount of months of what I need per week to live. That was a really long-winded way of saying it, I know, sorry. Let me move to our flower farm. So some of these figures I don't really track in the depth I used to, because as you start to track your own things, you'll work out what you want to know and don't want to know. So, for example, we know that our customers have contributed $157 to our breeder royalty donation program. Fantastic. That's completely on them. We don't ask them to do it. We pay it regardless. But some customers go, do you know what? They want to part of that journey and recognize those breeders. So we thank you. Cafe bunches. They've kind of just been amalgamated into flower arrangements as time's gone on, because do I really need to know how many cafe bunches I'm selling versus what I've sold to my customer? Probably not. All I want to know is that I'm selling flowers and I'm making money doing it, because it's worth those 10 o'clock at nights, running down the paddock in the dark, picking something and then trying to bunch it and thinking, oh God, I've got to be back at work at 5 a.m. Anyway, did it pay off? Well, the flowers themselves this year made $12,000, and that's nothing to be sniffed at, considering the community we're in and we're not the only flower farm around. I'm happy with that this year. We can look at our dahlia plants and our tubers. We're sitting around that 50,000 K. It's probably about half of our income came from them as an income. It'd be nice if that was a bit more, but as we build our brand and business and what we can achieve being realistically two people, to grow, you then need to be available more on the farm. And I said, we're already both doing 100 hours a week easily somewhere in this business, plus we have our normal jobs. So you have to sleep. We have to pack plants and put them in boxes and get them out the door. It's all right saying I have to sold 300 plants on a Monday. Who's got 8? I have to be able to package all those plants within that 8-hour window and get them to the post office in time to get them to the customer. So you're kind of limited in some way with what you can physically do. Flowers direct to the customer versus the wholesale. Wholesale was good. We've picked up a florist this year. Predominantly, that's where the wholesalers come from. I stopped using direct to customer. Again, they've kind of been amalgamated into this flower arrangements. So next year, some of these little headers won't be there. We started selling our plants and our seeds. So I just saw that for $1,500 on our seeds this year is fantastic. It's not something we've really ever promoted before. Our Renunks went at the comms at $1,800. They've probably paid for themselves this year from what we've put in 2 or 3 years ago. Fantastic. The shipping income, well, that's not really income as such, but it's tracked because that's what Shopify has collected from our customers. So it does come as an income, but the expense should virtually be what the expense was there to offset what we put out. Thereabouts. Our subscription program, we don't really have many subscriptions. We have a couple. Most of the people who buy flowers buy them every week because they want a bunch of flowers, but they don't want that real commitment that they have to pay automatically. They'd rather just jump online and send you a text message and go, "Hi, can I get flowers?" And I've just paid it into your bank account. Fantastic. That's your demographic. I'm working with your customer base. My workshops, $7,000 doing workshops this year. Fantastic, amazing. I still don't get. It's not I don't get, so that's the wrong word. But every year you think that people are going to get bored of talking about or learning about dahlias, and it's not seem to be happening. It's just getting bigger and bigger. So we will see. It's very an interesting space. But whilst we can still bring that income in, particularly over winter, it's a good little source of cash flow. Um, I also do social media management. I've picked that up for a company down the road, so I invoice that as a company. So it's not really an income for the business, but it is an income because I have to invoice as myself, and rather than set up a whole separate entity as such, then I do it for the company. With the purpose of it, I bought a new car, which the business is paying on a loan, and if I do my social media management, if I have a really crappy week income elsewhere, I know that that car loan will be serviced. There's not much money in there because I've only really just started it again in the last couple of months, but additionally, it's a good little source of income for the farm. We got some sponsorship money coming earlier on. That was $1,000. So that's effectively what makes up that 120k of income this year. More important, let's look at what's going outwards. So it gives you an idea. Jesus, Jamie, not really. I'm trying to find my cost of sales. There we go. So within those cost of sales, if I want to actually sell a plant, what does that actually cost me to do that? These are the most important. These are where this section at the top comes from. So we can look again with a breeder royalty program. It's a donation. It's a cost because if we're going to sell that plant, we've committed we're going to make that donation. So we donated $1,100 back into the community this year. Hopefully that'll be a lot more next year as we improve how the reporting on that and the identification of the cultivars. It takes a while. We've got 560 varieties or more now, and tracking them all and making sure that that information is correct, and we can connect with as many families as possible and breeders. It's all work, but the goal is there. We've got our freight costs, so we have to buy our flowers in, so when they get shipped and I have to pay delivery on them, not much, but it's in there. The actual cost of buying flowers or buying my wrapping and etc. Ingredients get broken into for condiments, packaging, shipping materials, so our tape, our boxes. This kind of packaging is more around this is more like your everyday tape, leaflets, pamphlets, whereas this is your physical labels. So if I have to go and get labels on my jars, then there's $1,000 kind of thing. Sorry, 1,000 labels. It's that big bulk, real packaging versus everyday sundries. Probably next year I might not break them out as much. I might change it into so I actually have it more as it's actually shipping materials versus packaging for a label, so I can see that how much we're spending on delivering a product in a nice presentable form versus the actual cost of the product. Anyway, plant seeds and dahlias. So when I go away and I buy tubers, that goes into that because obviously if I don't have the seed or the plant in the ground, then I don't have a product to sell. So it's a direct cost. Our actual shipping costs. So this is what I've paid to Australia Post this year in shipping. And then we can go into our overall costs. So you even look at like our accounting and bookkeeping. We've got our advertising and marketing. So that's usually built up with things like our website, if I've run any ads, if I've had things printed, that kind of stuff. We've got bank fees and charges, clothing, any contractors we've had to pay for to come and do things for us. Cost of making produce, well, it's $29. I probably don't even really use that, as you can see. I've actually got a dahlia farm in there, which is quite interesting. So this year I really broke it down to try and see what we were spending on the farm, and I want to look. Be interesting why that's there. It should actually come into one of these costs. So, in the financial year, there's a bit of homework, bit of tidying up to be done. But our actual dahlia farm itself only cost us $4,900 this year, and that's pretty good. Like, it was really interesting to be able to break that down into generic areas. So overall, we still got. So we look at this. It's about $15,000. the actual farm has cost to produce its dahlias. And that's broken into we're in our fifth, sixth year now. We've got a lot of infrastructure in place. We still want to put more infrastructure in place. The next year it's going to go up again. I know we're looking at some projects if we can afford them. But the day-to-day running costs of, machinery needing to be fixed, petrol, diesel for running our little mowers, and all that kind of running costs was $4,900. So in the big scheme of things, when we talk about what the daily has made 50K, yeah, that's not a bad outcome on them, really. Obviously, you've got all these other things to come into play and work out, but it wasn't that bad an expenditure. We were accredited this year with AgVic to do our tomato potato psyllid. Um, and we weren't sure exactly what that was going to cost us in setting up. It was $161. Like in the big scheme of things, it wasn't anything to even think about. But when we have our full accreditation inspection with the inspector when they come on farm, maybe these things will have to change. It's good to track that because that then helps me, make informed decisions about costs and whether we have to charge for having our plants treated and then issuing certificates of health before we send them, which we haven't gone down that pathway. And obviously, $161, we just absorb that into the cost of the business. But if it changes dramatically, we can make that decision. Our paddock expenses, so that's pretty much anything that's actually down physically in the paddock, star pickets, wire, irrigation, fertilizer, all of that cost is out there. So I can say how much money I'm actually putting into my ground versus what it's actually making back on me. Which at the moment, I think even if we just looked at it from a flower point of view, the flowers were about $12,000. We're about 50-50. Plus, we're also getting money out of the paddock for our tubers and elsewhere. I've broken out the propagation this year because ultimately the propagating of plants and then selling them has nothing to do with my farm, nothing to do with the farm, nothing to do with my paddock. It's almost like its own entity of the business arm. So what we're putting in, and what we're selling our plants, and what I'm paying, effectively paying Gareth to operate that side of the business versus the money we're putting into it to produce it. Does that break even? Are we losing money? Are we making money? We're definitely making money in that space at the moment, but that's considerations to make. So that kind of keeps it in there. Any education, training, equipment purposes I've done. The big one, of course, is our fees. You always have to need to know what you're spending. Afterpay charges you a lot of money, so we no longer offer Afterpay. We made that decision at Christmas; it just wasn't viable. And you can almost save, if you think about Afterpay in 6 months of me selling tubers, $400 versus 12 months of PayPal. It was a bit of money, well, a couple of $100, but it all adds up. Market stall fees, well, we don't really do market stalls anymore. They were good for a while. The social kind of situation financially has changed the dynamics for us around here. I'm better off doing things on farm and bringing people to the farm than I am sitting at a market all day. PayPal, well, obviously there's fees involved. My Shopify fees, so that is every single time you make a purchase off me before Shopify pay me, they take 2% or 3%. Over the year, that cost me $1,200. It's annoying, but that is just part of life, isn't it? But it gives you an indication of what that looks like. My website fees, so what it costs for me to actually run my website, about half of that realistically is ongoing website every single day. We've done a bit of work on improving our website, tweaking it, building the brand, and there's $500 that have gone to paying people to help us do that too. Then everyday life, we have fuels, we have gas, electricity, we have grant expenses, we've done motor vehicle expenses because we bought a new car this year. We had a few things going on in there. We've paid wages. We've got travel expenses when we've gone to conferences. Our telephone, mobile, and internet costs, superannuation because we have a staff member we have to pay. General subscriptions, so I can run, Canva, this program I'm using to record this on. These all start to become things you need to think about for your overheads. And if you're starting to spend more than you're actually making and infecting on your profit margin, well, first of all, you want to look at, am I spending things on money on I don't need to spend on? For us, it was $80 a month on MailChimp, which was in the subscription, I can't even do the maths at the moment, but $80, $1,200 a year minus, $1,000 a year, should we say, or $800 a year has now been saved by changing how we do things. And if you broke that into a weekly amount, because I always try and make everything into weeks, because that's basically my cash flow, I now need to earn a bit less from my everyday outside employment to make sure that my business can still be functional with me in it, because that's ultimately the goal for us to be in the business full time. Um, and then at the end of the day, we come down to the fact that we've made a profit. So ultimately, as it stands, we'll have to pay some tax this year on $8,000 separated between the two of us, so $4,214.10 of that will be tax we now owe the government at the end of the day. So we're profitable, and in the current situation financially, 8 grand is still a big benefit for us. So I'm very pleased that we turned a profit. That's part of what business is about. It doesn't have to be big, particularly in a world where our income is so seasonal and variable. So anyway, I hope this workshop has tried to help and you've got something out of it. If you stayed with me till the very end, round of applause. I hope I haven't waffled on too much, but to finish it, always come back to being you. Tell your story through your socials, through your business, through your branding, because you can't be anyone else, and that's what people are always going to connect to you with. This was the first, I guess, delve into this kind of space of talking about the behind the scenes of business. This is what people were asking when we were trying to talk about Mifkas and what people wanted to learn, so we could develop this kind of framework, which apparently lots of people did. So hopefully it's well received. But thank you. If you did like it, please comment, please share. Please tell us what else you would like to learn. If you want me to go into more in details about how I'm doing something in QuickBooks or setting something up, let me know. If you want a copy of that spreadsheet, send me an email and I can send the link back to you. Yeah, always know your worth. Charge accordingly, the best you can. Don't just run down the paddock and get the extra flour and put it in just because you think it needs it. It probably doesn't. If you really need to put something in, put a piece of foliage in instead of a flower. Low cost inputs. And just be you.